All right, good morning. We want to make a brief statement this morning concerning the statement made by the Prime Minister to the nation on Sunday night. In two particular areas, the Petrotrin situation and, of course, on the national scope. The first thing we want to say is that there's clearly a disconnect with the Prime Minister, his cabinet, his government, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly those persons on the ground. The poor, the unemployed, the underemployed, the retirees, the single parent, all of whom continue to struggle on a day-to-day basis to attempt to make ends meet. And all of whom are suffering as a result of this government's failed economic policies. And if there's one thing I want to start off this morning by saying, that the government has failed to prioritize in its attempt to deal with those persons at the lowest end of the economic spectrum in this economy. And so they continue to suffer as a result of failed PNM's government, Dr. Rowley's government policy. On the issue of Petrotrin, there's also a major disconnect. And that is simply because, first of all, the persons whom he put to head the board of Petrotrin, the board that comprises the board of director of Petrotrin, those persons are without the requisite competence and experience to move the company out of the challenges it now faces. That you have a chairman with absolutely no knowledge, competence, or experience to deal with such complex issues, Petrotrin is destined to go further south, away from any type of recovery that it so desperately needs. But let's just talk about his approach. When he says that Petrotrin, there will be job security provided for an adequate quota of efficient performing employees, or words to that effect, what in fact the Prime Minister is attempting to do is to lay the groundwork to send Petrotrin workers home. Petrotrin is in a state today not because of the workers, it is because of the poor management, repeated poor management over the years by successive governments, including the People's National Movement. And so it was the OWTU who, over 8 months ago, would have been part of a committee recommending that Petrotrin be restructured urgently. What did the government and the Prime Minister do from then to now is anybody's guess, but that issue has not been addressed. And worse than all of those things, since then to now, there's been absolutely no consultation with the Alphys Workers Trade Union, the recognized majority union, in any regard with respect to Petrotrin's restructuring or Petrotrin's proper and efficient managing. And so repeated requests to meet with the board has been met with silence, and the board continues to take advice from friends and supporters of the government without the technical input and without the technical expertise and so on. Our recommendation is clear that Petrotrin ought to be broken up into manageable segments. The Trinma ought to be operated separately. Exploration and production, land, north and east operations ought to be operated separately. And of course, the refining and marketing division, all of them with a high level of autonomy and accountability and so on, with responsibilities and calling for people to account for their performance. What you have in Petrotrin thus far is superstructure that is totally unwielding and unmanageable. And that is why we were calling for the urgent restructuring. But let me say further, the board is at this time is micromanaging by continuing to give out lucrative wells to the government's friends. Let me say that again. You would imagine that all of the bacchanal and scandal that was exposed not too long ago, a halt would have been placed on that mode of crude oil production, where they would have ceased to give out lucrative wells and acreages to their friends and supporters. The board is complicit in that now, in that we are seeing directive coming from the board directing that certain wells, lucrative wells, be given out to their friends. And that is an approach that continues unabated, which we are totally and radically against. Let me also say that major contributor to where Petrotrin is today had to do with decisions made by the then Malcolm Jones, the executive chairman, taking a decision to enter into WGTL, World Gas to Liquid Operation, which we condemned then and pointed to and advised strongly that they should use those resources for the reactivation of Trinma's Southwest Soldado field, where you get the best quality crude and where you have the most potential to ramp up crude oil production by some 10,000 plus barrels per day. That is what we could have gotten had they taken that advice. We are going down the same road again, where a prime minister does not know that he does not know, listen to people who do not know, and is taking Petrotrin down the road of destruction and want to blame both the union and the workers for Petrotrin's impending demise should it not be addressed. And wait not for these very workers, in the face of poor management, in the face of bad governance from successive governments, including this one, it is the Petrotrin workers who kept Petrotrin afloat so that the country can benefit. And when he says that Petrotrin owes the state some $2 billion plus in royalties and taxes, that is true. But then he does not, alongside that, tell the nation what Petrotrin would have contributed, albeit short of their contribution for obvious reasons, but what Petrotrin continues to contribute, what Petrotrin would have contributed over the last 4 or 5 years to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course what they do, what did those governments, including his, do with those revenues. We cannot do without a Petrotrin in Trinidad and Tobago. We cannot do without such a key state enterprise be handed to private interests. And the OWTU is going to embark on a rapid and aggressive mobilization campaign, starting with tomorrow morning at Trinma, and Friday morning at the Point-a-Pier roundabout, and next week in the exploration and production field, mobilizing the workers, having them know that the government is not a government for the people. The government is a government for the lovers of the government and the PNM, and that if you do not take action in your own interest and in the interest of the company, the country will suffer, and of course your job security would vanish. We are going to turn this place upside down, because the government, as incompetent as they are, they will destroy whatever is left of Petrotrin. But you know what? Petrotrin will be placed in the hands of friends, family, and financiers for yet another occasion. We are not about to allow that. And that is the statement we want to make here this morning, except to say and invite you to cover all of those events where we will be talking with those workers and taking serious positions as to the way forward. The company cannot be restructured properly without the involvement of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union. It was the OWTU, my God, who came up with the idea, who did the research, did the groundwork, presented the plan for restructuring. Had that plan presented to that 7-member committee appointed by the same Dr. Rowley, they could find no faults with that plan, but all they did was bungle after bungle and not implement it now. Now wanting to make the case to send workers home. Today as we speak, there are some, we are approaching some 800 vacancies across the Petrotrin's operation. And those are persons who the company would depend on to work on the wells and on the platforms offshore, and to work in the producing fields, and operators and skilled workers in the refinery, technical workers in the refinery, to bring about the increased production and to process that crude for marketing so that the country can get foreign exchange. We are overloading Petrotrin with management, top management people, simply because of the political interference in the company's operation. And so we are with people at the top, high-paying positions that knows absolutely nothing about the Petrotrin's operation. And may I remind you, our discussion, the OWTU's discussion about this in the public, when we warned the public about that, myself, the President General of the recognized majority union, was sued, taken to court for telling the public what has happened with Petrotrin. Today we are consistent. We are saying that what we are receiving now is not good governance. This country is receiving very poor governance from those who requested the job. They cannot do the job. Poor people are suffering in this country every day. The unemployed, the retirees, those on fixed income, the minimum wage earners, and so on, and the single parent, the mothers who have to find money to send their children to school. All of them are at the lowest end of the economic ladder in this country, and there is no equitable sharing of the burden of adjustment. So when Dr. Rowley, supported by his cronies, attempt to make that case, tell that to the person who talks to us every day about the problems and the pain and the suffering they experience since this government has come into office. We will not allow that to go unnoticed, and certainly we will not allow that to go unchallenged. Yeah? Thanks for your coverage, and stand by for our aggressive mobilization with the Petrotrin workers in the interest of Petrotrin and in the interest of job security, certainly in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago.
The way forward is not retrenching or sending workers home. You're saying that these workers are ones who will be needed in order to increase productivity. What are you saying is the way forward?
Absolutely.
Who's according to the Prime Minister, which is doing the government billions of dollars. What are you seeing as the way forward without sending the workers home? What are you seeing as the way forward?
Well, yeah. But first of all, for Petrotrin to be able to meet its obligation to the state, it has to be operated efficiently. Let's get that clear. And operating efficiently means immediately it calls for a restructuring of Petrotrin operation. And the model to which we would have recommended, which model would have worked efficiently in the past. And that is where we are coming from, experience as to what worked and what did not work. So let's aggressively restructure Petrotrin, but I'm saying Petrotrin cannot be properly restructured without the significant and valued input of the workers and their union. No board can come from where it come from and restructure Petrotrin, except, of course, it had the full cooperation and assistance of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union and the workers. Let's put that out. Secondly, it is an efficient operating Petrotrin that would allow for this to pay all of those debts, and in addition to that, realize its fullest potential and make its contribution. How is that done? You cannot do that if you send workers home. It is not an abstract company. It is not a virtual company. It is a company that requires workers offshore to work on the wells, to work on the platforms, to work on the compression facilities, to work on the pumping facilities, to send oil to shore, to the tank farm, to be processed, the various tanks farm, to be processed, to send to the refinery. It is the workers that are required to work in the fields to service those wells, and so on, so that those wells can be at their optimum, that they can send maximum production to the refinery so that the company will pay and import less. See where I'm going? And then it is the workers that are required in the refinery operation to convert through various processes and technical operations to convert that crude oil into products, which products can be sold on the foreign market to earn foreign exchange and, of course, to supply the local market. So the point I'm making is that some 800 vacancies of real warm bodies, people who are required to, at various stages of the Petrotrin's operation, if you do not have people to do the work, the company will fall apart. It's not a case of sending workers home, nobody to do the work, and the company will survive. That could never work, and especially where you have aging infrastructure. Let me say, workers risk their lives every day through those aging infrastructure to keep that company going, to ensure that the country is powered and that we gain foreign exchange. And when you have a vehicle that has some age, an old vehicle requires more maintenance than a new vehicle. And therefore, what Petrotrin requires today is aggressive, rapid, predictive, proactive, and ongoing maintenance of all of its facilities. And that cannot happen if you send workers home. What they ought to do in the restructuring, which we call for, is to look at those top management positions which are not serving any purpose in terms of bringing in the crude and to allow for the company to be viable. Simply put, Petrotrin, if you send the workers home, Petrotrin would not survive. But more than that, if you send the workers home, the OWTU will have a serious problem with that. Not one worker who is required in the various chain of processes to produce that product should be sent home. Yeah? And there's where we will be basing our struggle. Yeah? Petrotrin is not to be given to nobody who is standing on the wings, waiting for more wells and so on. No, those wells, those assets ought to be operated in the country's interest. And let me just say, let me remind the country, it is the now chairman of Petrotrin, inexperienced chairman of Petrotrin, who sold his shares to CEMEX and allowed CEMEX to come in and take full control of TCL at Claxton Bay and TCL, Trinidad Cement Limited. The same chairman. It is this chairman who is about to implement the same model and give away national patrimony to friends, families, supporters, and business colleagues. The OWTU is not about to allow that. Yeah? So look out for us. We will be mobilizing the workers. All of their turnarounds that were supposed to come in on time, they went beyond the date of delivery, and there were major cost overruns. And that occurred under Malcolm Jones. It was accelerated under Lindsay Gillett, and it continues under the same chairman. There's no sense of priority with this government. All it is just a lot of talk. And I'm saying again for yet another time, you cannot have a restructuring of Petrotrin with your objective to send workers home, but worse yet, without the Oilfields Workers Trade Union involved in that. That cannot and will not happen. It will not be successful. And all of our requests, numerous requests to meet with the board to talk about the priorities of Petrotrin, those requests fell by the wayside, simply because they are with an agenda that is opposed to national interest. Some see national interest as satisfying their friends. We see it differently, as truly serving national interest where everybody can benefit. And giving away of the wells and giving away of lucrative fields of Petrotrin cannot be in the national interest, particularly in the face of all of this scandal with the fake oil and all of those things that we are now experiencing. They're even incompetent to deal with that. You saw what happened recently with that? When they tried to suspend or to remove the operator, you saw? That is the height of incompetence of the board, a demonstration of incompetence if you have ever seen one. And nobody is speaking with the union. And those things will continue, and the country will pay dearly, the workers will be blamed, and the sycophants will support an incompetent government, and all of us will go down sinking. We are about to tell the emperor that he is naked. We are about to tell the chairman that this is not TCL operation. What he's about to do is to cement Petrotrin's operation where it cannot move. The OWTU is not going to allow that. Thank you very much.